Meanwhile, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has congratulated Mr. Carney and his new government. However, Smith also said that many voters in the conservative stronghold of Alberta are frustrated to see a return to red in Ottawa. And just yesterday, Premier Smith announced a new bill that could potentially open the door for a referendum on Alberta remaining in Canada. The bill, Bill 54, makes a variety of changes to how Alberta conducts elections. However, what many commentators have their eyes on are changes to the Citizen Initiative Act.
We are expanding opportunities for Albertans to be involved in direct democracy by making changes to the threshold needed for successful citizens' initiatives. The signature collection time for citizens' initiatives will be extended from 90 days to 120 days. We are also improving the process by setting the threshold to be 10% of the number of eligible voters who participated in the last general election, as opposed to being either 10 or 20% of total registered voters.
Rahim Mohamed from the National Post joined us for more on what these changes mean in practice, specifically with rising tensions between Alberta and Ottawa and growing calls for a separation vote in the province.
So when we're talking about citizen petitions, citizens can either, one, propose legislation or a policy change to Alberta's Legislative Assembly, or two, propose a constitutional reform question to the provincial government that could then get put on the ballot during a special election. So these ballot questions don't have to be anything super seismic when it comes to Alberta federal government relations. There was recently a ballot question put forward on daylight savings time in 2021, in which a narrow majority of voters in the referendum decided to keep daylight savings time. So some of the big news, obviously with the timing of the announcement just a day after the federal election, is the window for collecting signatures for these sorts of initiatives. It's been extended from 90 days to 120 days. And the threshold for having these initiatives under consideration by the provincial government and ultimately on the ballot in a kind of special referendum, that threshold of the number of signatures you're needed, it's going to be about a third of what it's been beforehand, assuming that this legislation's passed. So beforehand, it was 20% of registered voters. Kind of quick napkin math, there were about 3 million registered voters in the last provincial election, which would make 20% of that 600,000. Under the new rules, it will be 10% of turnout. So turnout was about 1.7, 1.8 million in the last provincial election in 2023. So whatever 10% of that is. So obviously it's a much lower threshold to meet. It's a longer time to collect those requisite signatures. So it would open the door hypothetically to a kind of citizen-driven referendum question on Alberta's relationship with Canada.
We also asked Rahim about the allowance of corporate and union donations in the bill and the likelihood of a separation-type referendum in Alberta.
When it comes to third-party advertising in regular provincial elections, unions, businesses, they can register, but they typically don't say explicitly in their advertising what party they're going to support. So the nurses, for instance, will run ads talking about all the cuts to personnel under the UCP government, but they won't be able to say vote NDP. My understanding, and I'm not an expert on the law or any of the technical details here, my understanding of how these rules will pertain to a citizens initiative or any sort of referendum campaign is that the unions and corporations that are involved, the third parties that are involved ahead of time, need to say where they're going to stand on the referendum, whether they're kind of in the yes camp or the no camp. So I would imagine we would see something equivalent to what we saw in Quebec in 1995. I think that's a better comparator than Brexit. It's obviously domestic here, where we'd end up having a coalition of interests in the yes camp. Could be oil and gas companies, could be the Flames, whomever, and a coalition of interests in the no camp. And, kind of those third parties would be able to kind of signal their support or their opposition for whatever the referendum question is more directly. So I think it's almost inevitable that we'll see some sort of question relating to Alberta's place in the federation on the ballot. The threshold's about 175,000 signatures. You look at the latest polls, 25 to 30% of Albertans say they favor, they would vote to separate from Canada. I think a big issue is going to be in the wording of that question. You talk to people in the independence movement. There's disagreement about, do we have some sort of sovereignty association deal with Canada? Do we go it alone? Do we go it alone and seek some sort of special relationship with the United States? I think from what I've seen, a big source of division still among people that would put themselves in the Alberta sovereignty, Alberta independence camp is that relationship with the United States. Do we have a cozy relationship with Washington and set the stage for some sort of Texas two-step where, we separate from one country, we go it alone for a bit, and then we join another union? I think that's still something, people that are pro-Alberta independence have to sort out within their own camp. But I think the threshold of 175,000, among a population of about 3.5 million adults. I think that's going to be a pretty easy threshold to clear, given prevailing sentiments. Given that people who are upset and unhappy and frustrated with Alberta's place in a liberal-led federation. That's not fringe. It probably, you probably wouldn't have a referendum succeed in Alberta tomorrow. But the number of people who are fed up, I think, is well over the threshold.
After the announcement, the Premier was asked about the timing of the policy change.
Yeah, Premier, it's the day after a federal election, and this press release uses the word referendum or referendums, I think around 6 times. So is this something you're considering? And if so, what's the timing?
Well, we would have introduced this legislation a little bit earlier. We've been working on it, had a few final tweaks to make. We were going to introduce it regardless of what the outcome of the election was. It just so happens that this is the timing now that we're back from a week from constituency break. We knew that there were just some tweaks that we needed to make in certain areas. We had made promises about how we would revise some of the elections laws, and so it's just a matter of making sure that we're bringing that, just making those commitments. The timing is just what the timing is. We were always intending to bring this forward.